Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Court Vision with me, your host Jack Guthrie, where week by week we take a little look into the world of the British Basketball League. So, what's coming up on today's show? Firstly, we take a look back at the action from the past week in the BBL Championship, bringing you all the results from around the league. We also turn our heads to the BBL Trophy, looking at both games from London Lions versus Glasgow Rocks, and also looking ahead to the matchups between Plymouth and Surrey over this weekend. Don't forget, if you're new round here and you love British basketball content, to subscribe to the channel, like the video if you enjoyed, and also get your comments down below as to any topics or questions that you'd like to ask me or you want me to talk about in upcoming videos. So, without further ado, let's dive straight into it. And what better place to start than a roundup of the BBL action from last weekend, where we really do have to start with these lot. Plymouth Raiders pulled off an incredible 13-point win against second place Newcastle Eagles, winning 85-72. It was a game where everyone had an impact on the floor. Ricky McGill finished with 15 points, Mike Morsell finished with 16 points, and both Chris Porter-Bunton and Will Neighbour finished with 13 points, with CPB also racking up 11 rebounds for a double-double. There were also strong performances from the Newcastle Eagles squad, with 4 of their starters getting into double digits in points, but the rebounding and defensive efforts from Plymouth Raiders really helped them build out to an insurmountable lead after an incredible third quarter, being able to cruise to a win in the fourth. Cheshire Phoenix handed Leicester Riders their second loss on the bounce, after a corner three from Caron Ross ended up winning them the game 93-91. Since adding British big Matthew Bryan and Manning, Cheshire Phoenix have looked like a completely revolutionised team, and this game was no different. NBA and Jalen Hayes both finished with double-doubles in points and rebounds, whilst the backcourt combo of Ross and Mike McCall Jr. ended up piling on 46 points between them. 21-point performances from Corey Johnson and Gino Crandall weren't quite enough to give the away side the win. However, they did make for really exciting viewing for neutral fans up and down the country. Surrey Scorchers played 2 games in 2 days over the weekend, starting off with an away trip to Worcester, where they lost to their in-form hosts 84-77. Brandon Anderson and Jordan Williams posed the biggest problems for Surrey, as they both reached 20 points in that game, with Jordan Williams also racking up 12 rebounds. Wolves' newest signing Elijah Burns also proved his efficiency from beyond the arc, going 3 of 6 in the game to give him his total of 9 points. Ryan Richards was once again the driving force in the Surrey Scorchers side. He hit 71% of his shots from the field, knocking down 21 points. Scorchers' second game of the weekend finished on a much brighter note, blowing out Glasgow Rocks by 21 points, with plenty to marvel at in their 81-60 win. Cam Hildreth finished with 12 points in that game and threw down 2 monster dunks, one of them over Rocks guard David Mpondo, and he was just feeling it out there. Everything was clicking for him. Richards and Imondre Rickman finished with 13 and 12 points respectively, and Christian Keeling was the only Rocks player to hit double digits, as he finished with 14 points on the night. The difference between the sides was like night and day. Surrey had a double-digit advantage on the boards and even had double the amount of team assists that Glasgow did. Double. Newcastle Eagles were able to bounce back from their loss against Raiders by beating Manchester Giants 101-76, where they really looked back to their usual best. Ramon Fletcher showed us why he's a former 2-time BBL MVP, finishing with 23 points and 11 assists, unlocking the Giants' defence throughout the whole game. Cortez Edwards and Evan Maxwell also reached the 20-point mark, while Darius Defoe, Rex Fluger and Louis Sayers all also reached double digits. Manchester's newest signing, Aaron Jeramipour, came back to the club after over a decade away, and in his first game managed to notch up 16 points in a really good individual performance. There were also some other really good individual performances in that game from David Olf, Sam Cassell Jr. and Donovan Marshall-Johnson. Manchester are now really struggling, without a head coach, out of the playoffs and seemingly drifting further away from those playoff spots. I hate to say it, but things look like they could get uglier. The final league game of the weekend saw Cheshire look to solidify themselves in the playoff spots as they faced Sheffield Sharks and beat them 75-69. This win now also means that the Knicks move above the Sharks in the league standings. Another solid all-round performance saw 5 Cheshire players reach double digits in points on the night, with efficient performances particularly from Carl Carey, Jimbo Lull and of course MBA. Sheffield put up a very good fight however, with BBL Player of the Month Antoine Lillard putting up 21 points and 9 rebounds, with another 20 points coming from Jeremy Hemsley. And there was also another incredibly good performance off the bench from Bennett Cock. These sorts of mid-table matchups are looking really tasty, particularly as we enter the home straight of the BBL League season. Teams are now wrestling each other to get those all-important playoff bids, and Cheshire's late run could really solidify themselves towards the top of those standings. Talking about the standings, let's see how the league's shaping up. So at the top we still have Leicester Riders. Even though they have lost 2 on the bounce, they are still at the top of the BBL Championship with 14 wins and 3 losses, leading the league with 28 points. Closely followed by Newcastle, then Plymouth going ahead of London Lions and Sheffield Sharks by getting their 11th win on the season. London now 4th. Cheshire Phoenix rising above Sheffield Sharks like I said earlier. They're now in the 5th position with Sheffield in 6th, Worcester down in 7th, Bristol Flyers occupying the final playoff spot in that 8th position. Manchester Giants are just out on losses. They've got 3 more losses than Bristol Flyers at the moment, and they're looking really far adrift at the moment. Surrey Scorchers are down second last with a 5-11 record, and Glasgow Rocks, again I'm going to say it, are rock bottom with 2 wins and 14 losses, only 4 points this league season. Let's now take a look at next weekend's games, and oh boy is it a packed schedule. So starting on Friday night, I'm going to have to quickfire this, aren't I? London Lions face Manchester Giants, Sheffield Sharks face Worcester Wolves, the Flyers take on the Phoenix, Newcastle Eagles play host to Leicester Riders in a top of the table clash, and then we see the first leg of Plymouth Raiders versus Surrey Scorchers, the BBL Trophy semi-final between those 2 teams. Then on Sunday, oh my god, we've got another one. Okay, so Surrey Scorchers will then play host to Plymouth Raiders in the second leg of the BBL Trophy semi-finals. Sheffield Sharks will play Bristol Flyers, Cheshire Phoenix play Manchester Giants, Glasgow Rocks face Worcester Wolves, and Leicester Riders have another top of the table clash again, but this time with London Lions. Oh, thank God that's done. Now let's move on and take a look at the BBL Trophy semi-final matchups. London Lions have grabbed the first spot in the BBL Trophy final with 2 wins over Glasgow Rocks. Glasgow in the end had a mountain to climb after a poor performance in the first game, and London eventually just cruised out to an unassailable lead. Lions cruised through the first game with minimal fuss and eventually went out to a big lead, winning it 90-66. DeAndre Liggins finished with 28 points, 5 rebounds and 4 assists, and he really controlled the game for London. Justin Robinson and Dirk Williams also managed to get into double digits for points in that game, but it was really the overall team stats where London really showed their dominance. Glasgow actually only managed to beat Lions in 3 different team stats, those being their 3-point percentage, the amount of team blocks, but also giving away fewer personal fouls, whereas London were completely dominant on the boards, gave away fewer turnovers and amassed 26 points off the fast break, whereas Glasgow only managed to get 9. The Rocks had to win the second leg by 25 points, or perform a miracle, to catch up on what seemed to be an unassailable lead, especially after an absolutely dreadful first leg performance. The second leg, however, to many people's surprise, was a much closer, much more competitive affair, even though Glasgow lost again and by 19 points. The score ended at 108-89 in favour of the London Lions, but massive credit must be given to Glasgow Rocks for putting up a really courageous performance against, let's be perfectly honest, an incredible team. The points were shared fairly evenly in the Scottish side as 6 of their players got double digits in points. Christian Keeley managed to rack up 17 points, and Ronald Dell flirted with a double-double as he put up 14 points and pulled down 9 rebounds. A lot of Glasgow's really good work on offense came in the key as they were able to amass 42 points in the paint, which was 8 more than their opponents. But as is always the story of the game with London Lions, if one player is falling slightly short, there is another player who steps right in and has a game. This time it was Dirk Williams. Dirk finished with 26 points and just over 50% shooting on the night. Now, in the last video I was slightly critical of London Lions without Kevin Ware not being able to score from the bench. Well, Kevin Ware came back for this game and lo and behold, they started scoring again. Ware had a massive impact. He had 22 points from the bench and hit 6 out of 6. Yep, 100% from behind the arc. His performance tonight was just automatic. Jules Dangakodo also finished with 11 points on the night, and let's be perfectly honest, the result over the two games probably didn't go much differently to how we expected it to go. I also quickly want to address the controversial halftime tweet that London put out in the second game, where they referred to Glasgow as the other team. Now, from my perspective as someone who's worked as part of a media team, I just think it's completely and utterly insulting that you would completely disregard a team that you're playing against in a competitive fixture. I just think there's a professional standard that you need to hold yourself to and hold your work to when you're working in the world of media or content creation, particularly around British basketball, that we're trying to grow and trying to draw more fans into this. When you go out tweeting stuff like that, it's ludicrous. You're not going to gain the support of fans. If anything, you're going to get the complete opposite reaction. But the fact that whoever tweeted it had the audacity to do it in a competitive fixture against a competitive team, it just blows my mind. For me, I'd see this as a completely unprofessional move, and I'd never do this against another team. But whatever London thought they were doing, it definitely isn't banter. It's crossed the line of banter, and it definitely is insulting. But anyway, I don't want to cover too much on that, and if you want to see my reaction more to it, check over on Twitter, I've put a thread about it. Now, it wouldn't be a final with only one team, and Plymouth and Surrey are battling it out over this weekend for that final spot in the final. Now, when you take a little look at the league positions of these two teams, Plymouth obviously now being third after their win against Newcastle and Surrey being second bottom despite also winning, you would have thought that this should be a fairly one-sided game. However, this is basketball and it is two-legged and everything in sport's unpredictable, particularly after this year we've had. So where is this game likely going to be won and lost? Well, first we have to bring your attention to the front courts, because the front courts for both these sides have been incredible. For Surrey, for example, you've got the resurgence of Ryan Richards. He's playing a pivotal role and he really is proving to be one of the key guys, one of the key leadership figures and veterans within that team, alongside the likes of Teo Ogedengbe. Whereas where you look at Raiders' side, we don't know if Ashley Hamilton's going to be back for the game, but if he is, he's going to be a huge influence. Even if not, the likes of Mike Ocharobia and Will Neighbour, who is bang in form over the past couple of games, they'll have a massive impact. What I think will also benefit Raiders in this game is the fact that Ryan Richards played for them last season, obviously before COVID took over and everything like that. And he was really finding his stride under coach Paul James, and then obviously the season ended. But being paired up in that front court with Will Neighbour from last season, I think will give Raiders an advantage of how to defend him, because he's been putting up big points totals over the past couple of games. So that'll be an interesting battle to watch unfold. There are still a lot of ifs and buts surrounding this game. For example, like I iterated to earlier, if Ashley Hamilton will be fit. Now, he's someone who completely changes the dynamic of the Plymouth Raiders team because he just plays bully ball in the paint. He's getting more effective from outside as well, but where he really thrives is driving the lanes, taking on forwards, outpacing them and finishing with either the left or the right. His ability to also draw fouls as he's driving the lane plays a crucial part in Plymouth Raiders' game plan. Now, even though as a team they haven't been shooting a great percentage of free throws, to put it lightly, throughout this season, he's definitely someone that can get points at the line. And the more opportunities you get from the line, the more likely you're going to be scoring points from the line. Then when you take a look at the two sets of backcourts, you've got a load of players who are really in their stride at the moment, particularly for Plymouth Raiders and Ricky McGill. He's really solidified himself in the role as the finisher whilst Ashley Hamilton has been out. He's the one always dictating the play, making those cute little passes inside, but also taking the game outside, knocking shots down, and really just dictating the pace and the flow of the game, whilst also on the defensive end putting pressure on very, very experienced guards. And obviously it has been hard for Plymouth Raiders fans to see Andrew Lawrence sat on the bench instead of playing in games, basically acting as like an assistant coach at times. Because of his injury problems, he hasn't been able to play at all this season. Hopefully he'll still be able to play, ideally before the playoffs. But for the moment, it looks like Plymouth Raiders are more than happy with Ricky McGill taking the lead in that number 1 spot. And looking at the Surrey team, the opposite number that will likely be coming up against Ricky McGill is Cameron Hildreth. Now, most British basketball fans will know exactly who he is. So if you don't, where the hell have you been? Cameron Hildreth is probably the best young British prospect that we've had in terms of basketball for probably at least the last decade. He's already committed to play for Wake Forest in the NCAA Div 1 for next season, whilst this season he plays for Surrey Scorchers on an unpaid contract. British basketball fans have been keeping tabs on Killer Cam for a while, as he spent quite a bit of time in NBL Division 1 with Worthing Thunder, where he completely tore up the league. He's now come up and stepped up in the BBL, showing off the flair and the skill that he'll need going into his next year at Wake Forest. Another massive reason as to why Cam has probably settled so well into the BBL is because of the fact that he also has Ryan Richards on his team. Now, we've talked about Ryan Richards a lot in this episode. Ryan Richards is the absolute perfect person for Cam Hildreth to go to for any problems, particularly when Ryan Richards was in the exact same position as Cam Hildreth is now, but only 10 years ago when he was drafted by the San Antonio Spurs, obviously in the NBA. But without reading too much into Cam Hildreth's potential future, what he's doing right now in the BBL is quite frankly incredible. He's proven that he's an athletic, skilled, competent shooter who's willing to take the difficult shots and also win you games. Hildreth's also been linking up really well with the likes of Tony Hicks and Connor Cashaw, so Raiders are going to have quite a few problems when they face each other over the 2 games this weekend. As for who I think is going to come out on top in this matchup, well, hopefully that answers it for you. Now, yes, I've worked with Plymouth Raiders for about a year and a half now, doing work experience and volunteering. I wouldn't say I'm biased though, maybe just partisan. But in all honesty, when you take a look at the form that Plymouth Raiders are in, they look unstoppable at the moment. They're putting big points up against massive teams and they're comfortably winning games. Now, don't get me wrong, Surrey Scorchers are also in very good form. I just don't feel like they have what it takes to beat Plymouth Raiders over the 2 legs. There is every chance that they might take 1 game, but I just don't see them doing it across both of them. And that is it for another episode of Court Vision. Thank you all very much for watching. Please make sure you subscribe down below, like the video if you enjoyed, but also make sure to comment with any questions or subjects that you'd like me to answer or bring up in the upcoming episodes. Once again, this has been Court Vision. I've been your host, Jack Guthrie, and we'll see you in the next one.